Sometimes a little context helps, and if you're old enough to remember it, 2001 served that up in one horrifying, barely comprehensible portion. That was 9/11. I guess you'll remember where you were when it happened. I was staying with a friend for a while. Everything had collapsed that summer. My PhD, my relationship, my confidence. This was the worst of times. So watching the towers fall on that day in 2001 is forever linked to that feeling that everything was absolutely ruined, destroyed, game over. But those last few months of 2001 were the depths. By the very end of the year, things were beginning to brighten. I'd got a job via a mate from my master's course, and my girlfriend and I were slowly starting to work things out. So yeah, context. A lot of people had lived through indescribable events that year. Many hadn't made it at all. And we were still here. So let's move on. If you saw the recent Year 2000 episode, you'll recall me singing the praises of Dianoga and their album Battle Champions. And this was Oil Redo's standout gig of 2001, supporting Dianoga in London at 93 Feet East in February of this year. A great venue, a great bill. Caretaker were playing that night too. And Dianoga were, as well as being one of our favourite bands, extremely nice people. Yeah, this was one of those nights that you live for when you're playing in a band. But bands, they just do band things, and this turned out to be one of the last gigs that we played as a four-piece. Yes, Luke left a little later on that year, and after the briefest of discussions, we all decided to carry on as a trio. Charlie moving to bass, with me as the lone guitarist. On then with the music choices, and again a slimmed down shortlist this week. First up, the record I can't listen to anymore, despite being very, very good. This is Change by the Dismemberment Plan. Deeply introspective, breakup songs, end of the world songs. Very, very 2001. Thematically, a lot in common with 1999's Emergency and I. But with that one found an odd beauty and comfort in being lost and confused and adrift. Change goes much deeper, much darker, and on downward into desperation and depression. Yeah, I still find this one a little too close to the bone to play, even today. So, sorry, you go on ahead. Don't mind me. Another one with caveats? Okay, yeah, I have no problem listening to this one. It's a quite beautiful record, in fact, but the artist himself I find a little problematic nowadays. Yeah, this is What's Next to the Moon by Mark Kozelek. There's a whole can of worms to slope through regarding the artist versus their art, which I'm not getting bibbed up for here, but if you're okay with separating one from the other, then do step this way. Mega fans of AC/DC, however, might find this problematic for entirely different reasons, because herein lie 10 radical acoustic reinterpretations of Bon Scott era DC songs. There's Love Hungry Man, Walk All Over You, Love at First Feel, and for me, the absolute stunner here, If You Want Blood. Absolutely spine-tingling stuff, and a real treat for the cover version aficionados out there. As for Kozelek himself, his songwriting has veered towards a kind of musical take on shitposting of late. But overlook that and all the other allegations of various wrongdoings, and you should enjoy this. And so, from the malign to the meticulous, I'm only joking, and a farewell of sorts, this is The Argument by Fugazi. And I say of sorts because the band is still officially on hiatus whilst the members pursue other projects and interests. Pretty much the perfectly evolved Fugazi record, incorporating and deploying every bit of studio guile and know-how accumulated via Red Medicine and End Hits, but exhibiting to me a little of everything they'd ever shown us over the years. Tracks like Full Disclosure and Oh, barring that veneer of studio craft, wouldn't sound out of place on Repeater or Killtaker. But the ambition and subtlety, the added instrumentation, there are dual drums, strings, piano, acoustic guitar, everything is fully integrated into these songs like never before. The slinky picciotto vocals with extra backing from Bridget Cross of Unrest on Life and Limb. The almost Joshua Tree-esque guitar atmosphere on the Lally sung The Kill. And those propulsive hand claps on the oddly effervescent Night Shop. There's a less declarative, more questioning lyrical tack across the record as a whole. But big anthems are represented, that's Epic Problem. And the openers, closers, always a highlight of Fugazi albums, are fantastic. There's the anti-gentrification rumble of Cash Out, and the downcast but defiant anti-war stance of the title track, one of their very greatest songs, without question. Okay, one more before this year's pick, and I'm struggling here. An impossibly difficult record to encapsulate in just a handful of words. Maybe the first of many points in this band's career where they audibly clicked up a gear and shared something with you that knocked you back a ways. Birth, life, love, the creation of new life, the spectre of death, but mostly love. In all its beauty, its terror, how much you need it, and how quickly it's gone. Yeah, this is Things We Lost in the Fire by Low. The band's second album with Albini Engineering after Secret Name. There are sonic changes here. The single, Dinosaur Act, was, by Low standards to that point, earth-shakingly loud, replete with a triumphant little Bob Weston trumpet solo. And throughout the album there are, additional strings, loops, extra stuff. But for me, it's lyrically and in Alan and Mimi's vocals that you hear the biggest shift. The imagery, rooted in love, spiritual and romantic, is spliced with menacing, sometimes violent frames and shots. The giant X's on your eyes in Sunflower. The line crushing your skull with my warming embrace in Closer. Or the something going off in my hands at the close of Like a Forest. The vocals are somehow barer, less adorned, allowing you to take in the way that they support and lift and balance one another out more than ever. From the impressionistic seep of the spooky whitetail to the euphoric celebration and the sadness of In Metal, this is, I think, the first album where Low showed how utterly fearless they were. A subtler shift on the surface than the digital hall of mirrors they deploy to contort their music towards the end. But the willingness to confront and contend with difficult, emotional truths on Things We Lost in the Fire stands as one of the bravest things Alan and Mimi ever did. So 2001, a year forever associated with a monumental act of violence, of destruction, an event laying the groundwork for a decade of war in Iraq and twice as long again in Afghanistan. Given all that, maybe the argument is the logical choice for a time like this. But sometimes, in dark days, you need a little light to help you find your way out. Something breezy, a little funny maybe, like that smart alecky friend who somehow keeps you grounded and afloat at the same time. This is that record. It's Insignificance by Jim O'Rourke. And though that title may hint at froth, at a lack of substance, there's a shrugged off, bruised poignancy in this record that is surprisingly pervasive and addictive. In fact, scanning down the list of records I've got lined up for the remainder of this decade, Insignificance is easily my most played record from this period. The third of Jim's Nicholas Roeg themed album trilogy, all named after films from the director's early 80s period, at the height of his taste for instinctive associative edits and fractured non-linear storytelling. Elements of which suffuse the songwriting and arrangements here. Familiar sounds and styles butting up against avant-garde flourishes without fear or concern. Maybe John Cale would be the only other precedent here. That love of the psychoacoustic symphonising of the Beach Boys' Brian Wilson, with flashes of dark, transgressive menace peeking through the gaps in the fabric of the music. But to that recipe, O'Rourke adds touches of pure 70s studio pop. Steely Dan, Harry Nilsson, Jackson Browne, heck, Toto, 10cc even, all supplemented with his gorgeous Fahey-esque finger-picking style. And throw in horns, piano, Glock, pedal steel, and you'd be forgiven for categorising this as chamber pop. Baroque, intricately arranged, bordering on the easy end of the spectrum. And for Jim's preceding album, Eureka, that might just work. But here, the addition of Skinnerd guitar, for instance, on opener All Downhill From Here, takes it off in an unexpectedly ram jam direction. Those same chewy guitars return for what might be the album's best track, the glorious Therefore I Am. Yeah, the incipient boogie reduced down to a hammering on-off concentrate, chained to a brutally bam-bam simple drumline. The song breaking off into soaring vocal harmonies, sweetening the krautrock chugel with falsetto swoops and Laurel Canyon syrup. Yeah, it's an absolute monster track. Really need to fit in a word for the lyrics here. Bitterly, bitchily funny throughout, poised between accusatory takedowns and self-immolating shame. On the pretty, faltering Memory Lame, for instance, Jim sings, "Looking at you reminds me of looking at the sun and how the blind are so damn lucky." Wonderful stuff. A punctured, let-down tone permeates the entire record. Jim's weary, feathery voice, the perfect deadpan accompaniment to the twists and the turns of the music surrounding him. The forlorn Hawaiian drift and sunset ennui of Good Times, ironically the saddest, most lovely song on the album, is beautiful. All desolate electric piano, pedal steel and understated picking. There's Get a Room, a resigned farewell to the world and a tale of a disastrous one last night stand, melting into noirish, muted trumpets and stuttering, glitchy percussion as the narrator's date falls asleep on him, leaving him to die alone anyway. Someone like Morrissey would turn this scenario into a torch song tragedy, but O'Rourke lets it play out into endlessly cycling rounds, a Latin-tinged, easy-listening death shuffle. And closing track, Life Goes Off, ends lyrically in ignominy, a sex game going off the rails. Jim sings about those pants that you bought for me, the ones that have no back. He's idly contemplating an embarrassing death whilst the music morphs from delicate folk into countryish pop. Hand claps and rising drums slowly overwhelming the song's climax with noisy, whirring, whining loops collapsing abruptly into a cacophonous hard cut. Yeah, this is a classic Roeg style edit to close, brutally capping off Jim's all too brief song period. Yet O'Rourke would spend much of the remaining 20 plus years playing much more challenging music. Because as it happens, the avant-garde was Jim's happy place all along. But for me, this makes his very short and sweet diversion into singer-songwriter territory during what were some very long and very dark days, a far from insignificant release in 2001. Yeah, 2001, a year I would have skipped given the option, but as it happened, there were some great releases this year. And like I say, Jim O'Rourke's Insignificance is probably one of my most played albums of the last 20 plus years. I don't know what your experience, musical or otherwise, of 2001 was, but yeah, let's talk about it down below. And yeah, maybe let me know what you think of Insignificance. Here we are, end of the video. Thanks for getting this far. Yeah, please think about giving this a like. It really does help me out. And yeah, why not subscribe if you haven't done so already? And off I go. Yeah, please do take care, and I hope to see you again on the channel very soon. Bye for now.